Hello, Fred. How you doing? This is the Browns Beat. I'm Barry McBride. I am your tame web dork. Also, the host of the show this week, Mike Keefe, is off. So, Fred, you've got a huge downgrade in hosting capability this week. Hopefully, you can survive it. How's it going, my friend?
Hey, it's like a reunion, Back to the Future, our old OBR Weekly brigade on Wednesday nights for several years. So, yeah, it's great to have you back. I'm doing great. And a week out from the draft. So, hey, it's the Browns Super Bowl for their fans, you know, that hope springs eternal, that somebody's coming through that door that's going to turn the franchise around. But I don't know. That's
they had a lot of good picks last year. Worked out very well for them in their first year, at least. And, hopefully Andrew Berry can put together two good drafts in a row. We will see. But why don't you introduce our special guest tonight as I add him to the stage here?
All right. Well, our special guest is Jon Cooper, not the former Ohio State coach, but the esteemed assistant general manager of Ourlad Scouting Service, the draft guide. Just got it today, Jon. So I was excited to be able to have it in my hands.
Well, that mail is late.
And so we had David Syverson on last week, and we had a great time talking, and we expect the same thing here tonight. To a little bit, Jon's background, just inducted in the Hall of Fame at Benedictine University a couple years ago. Longtime football coach, high school, college level. Something I didn't know. Bill Callahan, what Browns fans know, is also a Benedictine alum. Did you cross his paths with him when, in his days?
Well, yeah, I know. I've known Bill for a long time. He's younger than I am, but I didn't go to Benedictine. I coached there, but Bill was a student athlete at Benedictine, a very good athlete there, and he was in the Hall of Fame because of that. And but Bill was very good to me. Dan Shanka, our owner at Ourlad's, was the one that got Bill into the NFL when he was scouting for the Philadelphia Eagles. He noticed Bill as a coach at Wisconsin, and he told John Wooten, the time the personnel director, about him, and lo and behold, he hired him as their line coach, and that's how he got into the NFL. And Bill never forgot that. He was always very good to me. He donated quite a bit of money to the Benedictine football program when I was there, and he's a terrific guy. But anyway, there's a lot of stories about Dan and me and our lads, the Eagles, and so on down the line.
Yeah, Browns missed Bill Callahan when he went to be with his son in Tennessee, and it wasn't coincidental that the Browns' offensive line play seemed to drop off, and they've been trying to get that back. But we're glad to have you here tonight. And our lads, I've been associated. I was talking last week. I started with Browns News Illustrated back in the early 80s before the internet, and our lads advertised with us, and my job was to talk to the guys there and do write-ups and promoting the draft guide. So, it's been a long time, as well, my relationship. But we wanted to just, for the Browns, the Browns fans for so long, obviously never been the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl has always seemed to be the draft, that everybody, at least here, is hoping for the next guy or the first guy to turn this team around since the days of Jim Brown and Otto Graham. They're still looking for that. So obviously the franchise quarterback is always a topic, because without one in this league, you really have a tough time. It doesn't seem so far that the Browns are going in that direction, whether they just don't feel there's anybody, that can do that. At least there are indications in the offseason so far. We've heard no rumors or rumblings of them trying, to trade for anyone or to sign any of those free agents. So the draft is the last kind of open avenue. Obviously things can happen anytime, but do you feel like, assuming Mendoza goes number one as expected, what do you think well, just right off, what do you think about Ty Simpson?
Well, we have quite a bit of familiarity with him. One of the guys that played for me at Benedictine was his quarterback coach, the guy that works with him in the off season, and one of the two guys that spent quite a bit of time with him, and they love him. The thing though there is they think he's a year away, got 1 year starting experience. The one thing that he did that was very good in their minds, in my mind too, is that he stayed in school through two quarterbacks that were ahead of him, that were good quarterbacks, and he learned. And he's a football junkie. He's a coach's kid. I don't know who gave him the advice not to jump in the portal, but I think it's going to pay off. There was a loyalty factor there, and And he decided to enter the draft. I think this is a good year for him to do that. But on one hand, but on the other hand, he's probably not ready. And the team that drafts him should have another quarterback that is going to play ahead of him for at least a while, and let him develop, let him learn. And he's used to that. So I think that's probably what's going to happen with him in this draft.
Where do you think he would? Where would you think he would fall, or what would be the sweet spot that wouldn't be overdrafting him?
Well, we don't see him, as our ranking system is a first round pick, but quarterbacks are different. They can go in the first round. And nothing would really surprise me as far as when it comes to quarterbacks. Last year I was talking about Sanders, for example. Talking about Sanders, well, the Pittsburgh Steelers, look like a good option for Shedeur Sanders because they didn't have a quarterback. They had, Aaron Rodgers wasn't there yet, and so that's still an interesting scenario, as far as that goes. But let's assume, Rodgers is back. The Browns or the Steelers are happy with what they're doing, and but I can still see a team like them looking for that, but that they have a lot of needs. I can see the Cardinals being very interested in drafting the quarterback of the future. I don't think they're going to draft him early, but I could see that happening early in the second round, possibly. It's really hard to say. We did a 7-round mock draft, and we do it with a couple of guys, myself and Dave, do that mock draft, and we sit back and forth, and we've got a computer with our ranking that Ourlad has been doing this for a long time, and the computer spits out a player, and we can override it, which we do most of the time if there's a need and there's a player that's close. And it took a while for him to be selected in that mock draft, and we look back on it and we would say, if we would do it again, we would override that. We're going to do another one, and it's going to be just the first round coming up before the draft. And so it'll be interesting to see if we decide to stick him in the first round or not. We're not going to use a computer this time.
Now, as far as where the Browns specifically are, we know they made the trade down last year, and it really worked out for them, went down 3 spots, had a pretty good haul. We think that that's what Andrew Berry would like to do again this year. Who knows if you make it worth your while. So assuming they stay at 6 and 24, it's pretty obvious by the moves they made. They made some moves on the offensive line, but they haven't really done anything at left tackle. They signed a big contract right tackle who could play left if need be. But given where the rankings you have as a organization, 6 and 24, would you take the wide receiver first, or would you take the tackle first and think that you could get the opposite at that position? I looked at your rankings at offensive tackle and at wide receiver. You have 2 offensive tackles that are just first round, and then you have 5 that are first or second round. And then at wide receiver, you have 3 at the top, first round only, and 3 that are first or second round. So what would you think would be obviously it matters what happens ahead of them, but as far as assume they stay at 6 and 24, all things being equal?
Well, we think with Todd Monken being an old quarterback, I coached against him years and years ago when he was a player. And he might look to the receiver, but another thing, he wants that quarterback protected. I think Spencer Fano has the versatility to be a left tackle. We prefer him, although it's not a unanimous in our room as far as whether Maui Noah or he are the top guy. And we've got them ranked very close. But, Monroe Freeling has really come on, looking at more tape as we, evaluate even and second guess ourselves. We could make a case that he's a top 15 pick too, as a tackle. Caden Proctor has kind of maybe slipped a little bit as it's coming out about his conditioning's not the best. There's also Caleb Lemieux down there. And Blake Miller. There's some, there's some solid offensive linemen there. And the Browns could most likely get a guy at 26, but if they want to be certain they're going to get a left tackle prospect, they'll probably have to take him at 6. If they want to be certain they're going to get, a bona fide first-round receiver, maybe 6 would be the way to go. But we see some pretty quality receivers down low, like Concepcion, Omar Cooper, that are worthy of the Browns pick at 26 too. So we could see them going that route and getting the lineman first. George Young used to say, if you want to go to the Super Bowl, you need to dance with the elephants. And so using that philosophy, the Browns would probably take the tackle.
Yeah, they've just Andrew Berry, the one weak area since he's been here is drafting offensive tackles and wide receivers. The highest draft pick he used on a wide receiver in his first 6 years is Cedric Tillman. He took him in the 3rd round, 74th overall. So you just look and you just feel like the reason they fired Kevin Stefanski is because they didn't score any points. The last 2 years, he was an offensive coach. They scored 15 and 16 points a game. They kind of took a chance on disrupting the defense by passing over Jim Schwartz, who had put together a great defense, in favor of Todd Monken, who has been tasked with turning this offense around. So that's where it just seems like, sure, you need linemen. They've signed 3 free agents and re-signed 1, spent a lot of money there, but nothing in the wide receiver. So it just begs, it would seem like, to get wide receiver. In fact, to get 2 wide receivers in the first round, so you have them for 5 years. But I know they haven't solved the left tackle problem either. So that's where, this all goes, So it's like, it's going to be, until we see what they really are thinking. I was just curious what you guys thought, if you had a better chance to still get a top end wide receiver.
There's a good depth of receivers in this draft, so I could see them, taking the tackle. But if they really, and again, there's not a Marvin Harrison Jr. type, coming out in this draft. These guys are good. Tate is going to catch everything. He's a T. Higgins type receiver, great hands, great route runner. He's probably not going to, hit a lot of home runs as far as that goes, but he's going to get yards after the catch, and he's going to do everything well. And, he's one of those guys with a, real low floor. Ceiling's pretty good, but the floor is definitely low. If there's a sure thing at receiver, as far as a guy that's going to be a good playmaker for you, Tate comes pretty close. But Kai Lemon is more of a, slot type receiver. He's got better speed. He's got a little bit better route running ability, a little bit more quickness in and out of his breaks. He's a real solid pick. The guy that we really like is Tyson from Arizona State. We really like him. There's some injury concerns, and that has influenced our ranking of him in the end. Not a consensus there either as to who the top receiver is. We think he's top 15 though. Trading down for Browns makes sense.
Yeah. How many, I don't know what the term or what you guys term it, but say blue chip. Do you feel like do you grade overall, like how many are, I've read as few as 11 first round graded guys, or who you would consider blue chip players that if they're there at 6, even if you don't have a need, you got to take the guy?
I don't know if there is I would say that there's some guys I think are blue chip players. I think Mendoza's a blue chip player, if you want to use that term. Bailey, Payne, 2 edge rushers, we think they're blue chip styles. There's one of the better inside linebackers with cover skill and upside still that's come along in a while. He's a leader. Arvell Reese is a phenomenal athlete. I'd call him blue chip. After that, it gets pretty thin as far as that goes. We're not sure that, I think a lot of teams want to trade down because they feel the same way. I don't hear very many people in a hurry to trade up. The one team that sticks out is Kansas City. They want an edge rusher. They want, a Bailey. They want a Bain. This is what we're hearing. We don't know that for sure. It's a speculation. And so, Cleveland trade down there. If one of them's there, I think the Giants are a possibility. The Cardinals are a possibility to trade down. We could see Kansas City moving up. They're the only team I really feel would like to do. And Dallas is another one that could move up. Dallas trading to 6. They've got 2 first-round picks. So I could see them trading up. So they need an off-the-ball linebacker in the worst way. And Sonny Styles, oh my gosh, he would be a great fit in Dallas. Our mock draft had them taking C.J. Allen, but there's some injury question with him long term. So there's some, again, we don't have privy to all the information, so we're hearing some of it. And where there's smoke, there's fire. And some teams say, hey, you know what, we can't afford to take a risk with that high of a pick. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
There was 3 national mock drafts that came out today. 3 pretty prominent guys. We know mock drafts, but what you just mentioned, all 3 of them had the Cowboys trading up to number 6 with the Browns to take Sonny Styles. So we don't know if they just all came up with that or they all, how that came about. But what you said, where there's smoke, there's fire, makes you wonder, what that, if that's a realistic possibility. And I guess that's what I was getting at, is say the Browns are sitting there at 6 and Sonny Styles there, even though they don't need a defensive player maybe right now. Should you just take that unless you get a great offer?
Well, if he's that good a player, and I think he is, I think they'll get an offer. And if I'm a team trading down to 12, get the best offer you can, but take what you can get. I think the Giants are in the same boat. The Giants are a threat to take Sonny Styles. So they can dangle that out there, and all of a sudden Dallas wants Sonny Styles real bad. I don't know if that's the case. All right, let's trade up. And I could see them being a possibility in that scenario too. So now all of a sudden Dallas and Cleveland are, there's a little bit, a thing going on there as far as, who is the player we're marked targeting? Can we get that player? All of a sudden Dallas says, hey, we're going to have to go up and get that Giants pick and bypass Cleveland. Because I think there's more people wanting to trade down than up. So a team like the Giants at 5, they could be holding the cards right there. Because so that's what I think is happening.
What all 3 of them came up with pretty much the same, tilt was that the Browns would get that 3rd first round pick, the number 20 with Dallas, and they would have like 12, 20, and 24, or Dallas would get the Browns 6 and then 39. Do you think that's enough to make that trade? Because you might take yourself out of getting the best wide receiver and the best offensive tackle. If they were both on the board at 6, and you would lose out probably getting the best. I know there's depth, but I was just wondering if you thought it wasn't that much of a difference.
If it depends on what Dallas is offering. How desperate is Dallas? If Dallas is going to give them 20, along with 12, I would make that trade. That's 3 first-round picks, and you're going to be able to find players that can help your team. There's going to be a tackle there. Monroe Freeling very likely will be there. Maybe not. But either way, there's guys down the line that are solid. You should be able to get somebody at 12 that can make you better. And the other 2 first-round picks are going to, they're gravy in some ways. I'm not sure if I'm Dallas, I'm making that trade. Especially if I can, do better with another team trading up. It just depends on who's there, who's been taken. Do the Arizona Cardinals take Sonny Styles? That makes it a moot point. I don't think Cardinals are going to do that, but they could. Right now we kind of think Arvell Reese might go there, but then again, they might say, hey, this is a sure thing as an off-the-ball linebacker that we need. We're going to take Sonny Styles. I got to believe they're going to float that around, So if somebody, if they're willing to trade down, if Dallas is desperate, they can give up. They might be able to do that. Same thing with Kansas City with an edge rusher. So it's going to be interesting. Those are the two I'm going to be watching the closest.
You have a question, Barry?
Yeah, sure. If they did that trade and got 3 first-round picks, it's logical that they would take a wide receiver and a tackle, right? But they might also be very interested in some help in the defensive backfield, right? They need a third. They don't need a starting outside corner, but they need a third cornerback. You can never have too many of them, as they say. And they could also potentially look at safety. So who would you like sort of down in that 24 range at the defensive back, in the defensive backfield?
At corner, there's a couple of guys that, there's 2 guys that we think are the best two, and Mansour Delane and Jamard McCoy, and it's kind of pick them between those two. The injury factor with McCoy, it makes people a little nervous coming off the injury. He didn't play the entire season coming off the ACL. And those are our 2 bona fide first-round picks. After that, it's kind of pick them between about 4 or 5 guys, as to who's the next best guy and are they worthy of a first-round pick. Probably a late first-round pick. They all are. Terrell was a guy we really like a lot. He's only 5'10", 186 pounds, and has had some injury issues, some hamstring issues that have caused him to miss workouts. And now there's a big concern what to do with Avian Terrell. Is he the 3rd best corner still? Is he going to drop out of the first round? Colton Hood from Tennessee is a guy that was a kind of a revelation coming in and would have been playing alongside McCoy. He did a lot of things well, not the biggest in the world, but really a solid player with good speed. Keith Abney from Arizona State is another one we really like. He's only 5'10", and so that's a concern, but his cover skills are terrific. Brandon Cece from South Carolina and Chris Johnson from San Diego State. All of those guys are in play as a late first-round pick as far as we're concerned. Now,
interesting. What do you think about the safety from Toledo? The Browns brought him in to take a look at him. Maybe top 2nd round pick for them.
Who were you talking about now? Did you have a name specifically?
I think it's Warren.
Yeah.
Warren from Toledo.
Yeah. We think he's going to go in the first round. And we think, with one of those 2 later first-round picks, if the Browns could probably get him. We like him a lot. He's 6'3", he's 200 pounds, he can run, good cover skills. He's a little bit raw in some areas, but he's a good player. And there's a real big drop-off at safety after him. So now you're looking at a mid-2nd round pick as your next one. And so if you want a safety, that's why we think those 3 guys are going to go possibly in the top 20. Whereas originally we didn't have any of the only downs was that high. But because of what the safety room and the safety draft looks like, at least to us, we don't think there's a consensus next guy in that 2nd round necessarily. We like Genesis Smith because of his upside, but I think we're the only ones that are that high on him. But so far, we're not backing down on that one. He probably won't go as high as we have him, but we think ultimately he's going to be a real good NFL safety.
Let me ask you a couple tackles specifically. You mentioned a couple. I know the Browns have brought in Max Imaker or whatever it is from Arizona State. Where do you have him? Where do you think he could? I know he hasn't played that long, but a lot of people see a high upside. What's your assessment there with him?
The funny thing is the guy who does offensive line for us, his son is a special teams coordinator at Arizona State. He goes to every practice. So he has seen every Arizona State player, backwards and forwards, and he wrote a report on him. And he thinks he's raw. He's got some work to do. He thinks his upside is terrific because he can run. He's a great kid. He's very coachable. And he thinks on upside ways he could go higher in the second round than we have him. But originally we were one of the few services that had him in the second round that high, and it's because of Gene, our the guy who does line for us, because he's seen him so much, and he really likes the upside as a left tackle. And I could see a team early in that second round. I don't know if he'll slip into the first round as people do their evaluations of these guys, but I think an early second round pick is likely for him. We like him. We like the upside. Again, he's got some footwork things he's got to work out, but he's got speed. He's got athletic ability. He tested really well, and he's coachable. Not much more you want. And if you've got a good line coach that can mold this kid, he's going to be a good player.
And another guy that popped out, I looked in the book, I think Jennings Dunker, I think is his name, from Iowa.
Yeah.
You guys have him as a tackle, and a lot of places have him more an interior. I mean, talk about him a second.
Well, and that's very likely where he's going to end up as a guard. But our theory has always been, with rare exceptions, if you played tackle in college, we're going to list you as a tackle until someone shows us different. And, we've seen guys that, probably belong at guard that stay at tackle because of need. Someone may draft Dunker with a specific idea of playing guard, and we could definitely see that happen.
Do you see a problem with a guy playing right tackle in college and then going to the left side right away in the NFL? The reason I ask that, the Browns, the one time in Andrew Berry's first draft, they had the 10th pick overall, and he took Jed Wills, who played right tackle at Alabama. They put him at left tackle. He really never materialized to be the guy they wanted, and they moved on from him. He should be in the prime of his career right now for the Browns. That's why they're in the position they're at, looking for a left tackle. And Caden Proctor keeps getting talked about as a direct link to the Browns as high as 6. And so, I mean, you go right there, an Alabama tackle. So just kind of get your thoughts on switching them around. I know a lot of these guys play right tackle in college, but they, teams that are looking for left tackles like Fano and, a couple of the other ones listed. I think the Malaogo, he's also was a right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Proctor's a monster, first for him. He for a really big man, he's very light on his feet, and he has left tackle potential in the NFL, for sure. As far as moving a guy who's been a right tackle his whole time, that's a tough one. I'll give you another example, too, of what you're saying. The Bears had Ozzie Trapillo, long-time right tackle last year. They moved him to left tackle, and it really didn't work out, and he got hurt. So now they don't know what they're going to do. It's going to be a while before he's playing next year. And, they've got an issue, who's going to play left tackle. So similar to, maybe what Cleveland is thinking, too, is a similar situation. So my preference is if you're going to start a kid right away, he should be, if he's a left tackle in college, he should be a left tackle in the NFL, and the same thing, vice versa. There is a difference. And, Proctor can be a left tackle for sure if he can keep his weight down. He balloons up around 380, 390. He's been out of shape at different times. If he can keep that weight in that 350 range at 6'6", he's a pretty good mover, and he could play left tackle. But I think there's some risk with him. Lemieux is a developmental left tackle, the other Utah kid. Monroe Freeling, he's probably going to move it past both Proctor and Lemieux, in this draft from what we're seeing and kind of feeling as we, kind of restudy some of the tape and cross-check ourselves. So, it's going to be interesting to see. I think Freeling would make a nice pick for the Browns.
Do you think at 6, those guys would be in play, Freeling along with Fano or Mayogoa?
I think Fano would be, but there's still a possible. One of our mock drafts, we had the Cardinals taking Fano with that pick as as the best player available for a need for them. We don't have him there now. We kind of play around with those mock drafts, but he should be there at 6. Mauanoa is more of a right tackle, but he's got good feet. I think it's pick 'em between the two. Mauanoa may be more of a sure thing. I think he can come in and play right tackle for you, and if not, he's going to be a real good guard.
Is Fano's wingspan a concern for you? Sort of the shorter arms, or that he was measured at the combine?
Yeah, yes, it is. To be honest with you, but it's not the huge concern. We look at the wingspan differential, as we call it, and it's barely +3, which is adequate. So that's kind of where he's at. Obviously, Mauanoa has a better wingspan. No, not really, not much. I'm looking at it right now as we speak, and there's really not much difference between him and Mauanoa. His
Right.
arm length is slightly longer than Fano, but the wingspan differential is no better.
Right.
So you've got the same issue with both guys, and for that reason, there's a lot of people. There's some very strict analytics types that say both of those guys could end up as guards. So I don't necessarily look at it that way, but I understand what they're saying. You're looking at the statistics and reading them, and they can get some pretty good information. But I think they're a little bit better than predicting failure than success. And
Right.
there's some very successful players that don't necessarily fit the measurables.
I'm going to throw out a hypothetical. That's all this stuff is. But if I give you these two scenarios, tell me which one you think would, at least now, we don't know what they'll do in their career. But if the Browns got Fano and Concepcion in the first round, or Tate and Lamu, which one would you think would be a better get?
I think it's, kind of pick them there too. And, it's kind of 50-50 on that battle. But I think I would go with the offensive tackle. They both have holes. Concepcion is a quality receiver. I think you're going to get a good receiver. He's going to be a step below Tate, but you're still going to get a good player. So, I could see that. As far as the other scenario is concerned, with Tate and Lamu is a project, but he's got good left tackle potential, really good upside, and I could see that being a really nice pick for the Browns if they're willing to take some time and develop them. If you think you've got a left tackle that can at least play early and work Lamu in, I think you've got a good one. If you want to, if there's no time to play JV ball, you're going to have to really work with him and get him in there. I think at this point, I'd rather have Freeling than Lamu, but Freeling might not be there. Blake Miller's another one that's not bad either.
So there are some options there. As far as, I'm kind of curious to get your take. We haven't talked about it yet. You mentioned last year, but Shedeur Sanders, what's your take on him? How did you view him last year overall? We know how he had a historical drop, but now he's sitting there, in a position where the Browns don't have a clear-cut answer. And if he emerged as the answer, that would solve a lot of problems. But do you think if he's surrounded with some weapons and so forth, that he does have the upside to take the job and run with it?
Yeah, I think so. I think the thing about him, he's a guy that has to, he's not great at sensing the rush when things are around him. He's gotten better at it. He should be able to do, but he should be better at it. He's got NFL accuracy. Outside the numbers, he's as good as it gets as far as throwing guys open. As long as you protect him, as long as he's got a clean pocket, he's a good player. So if you're committed to Shedeur Sanders, get yourself the best left tackle that you can find and really build that offensive line. Now, I think Todd Monken is really good with quarterbacks. And I think he's going to do as good a job as possible, with what he's got. And I think Sanders is the guy you go with long term. We had a first round grade on him last year. And, at one time, we thought he was going to go in the first round. We were really surprised at what happened. And I don't know for sure what did. I was really surprised at what the Browns did, taking Gabriel and then taking him in the fifth. Obviously, it didn't have anything to do with his talent. It had more to do with all of the stuff, circus that goes around him. But I don't think that was a problem in Cleveland. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the thing is I do think that, and he's even said this, it isn't him, the hate either, 99% of the attention comes from being a Sanders, Deion's kid. And he's a great kid, as far as, but it is the most polarizing thing I've seen covering a team. And we've covered Johnny Manziel and of course Deshaun Watson and all the things that have gone on here. My theory is you have 32 NFL teams. I went through who the projected starters are for those 32 teams this year. And I bet you, at least 20, 22 or so have a starter already set up, maybe more than that. And teams in the NFL do not want a guy like Sanders as the backup because he brings too much attention, good or bad. I mean, it's maybe a different thing, but Tim Tebow, great guy, great teammate, but teams didn't seem to want him on the team because he was so popular and everybody wanted to know about him. And that's kind of what I see, as a writer. I write anything mildly negative and I hear it all day from the Sanders Nation and the opposite. You see something good, man, you got everybody wants to be your friend and so forth. So I think that's got to be something to it. But to drop from being maybe taken number 2 overall to the 5th round, that teams bypass or overlook a lot of things. You see a lot of off the field problems and they still take guys. So I have to think the true grade by scouts in the NFL was a lower, maybe not as low as he ended up going, but so anyway, it's just, it is. It's kind of a strange phenomenon. And the Browns didn't do Dylan Gabriel any favors by drafting Sanders because for whatever reason, they took him in the 3rd round. They liked him a lot better than Sanders. And I mean, he is like a no man, he got booed, when he came into the game when Sanders had to go out for a play or something. And it's like, it's no fault of his own, but it's just the way it is here in the NFL. So anyway, I don't know. I was just wondering with the take. We saw the way he started drifting around and getting sacked, 25-yard loss. I think he learned some things. We saw him get better as the year went on, those final 7 games. I will say he has what I would call the it factor. He's just, a calm, cool, collected, and can do it when the game's on the line. We did see that last year. We just didn't feel like he had much help in weapons. He had receivers dropping balls left and right, and he had no blocking up front. So I'm just thinking, build all up around him and see what you got in him. And if you don't have anything, you're going to be 2-15 anyway, and then you can get the quarterback maybe next year.
I think that's exactly what the thought process is. Let's build your football team. I think Cardinals are doing the same thing. They're going to try to build their football team and wait next year and see if we can get a quarterback. They got 2 backups as starters right now. The Browns have an advantage. They have a potential starter. And then they've got, a backup. And then I'm not sure what Deshaun Watson is anymore. But, it's with a new coach, I think they're going to do. I think they'll do a good job drafting. I think Stefanski was a good coach, but he got dealt a bad hand, and now they're coming out of that, and we'll see what happens with Todd.
Well, that's, Browns coaches might not be looking for long shelf life. And I think Todd Monken at 60, his first chance, wants to win. I don't think he's in this. And I've just said this. I've been on record. I watched Deshaun Watson practice 2 summers in training camp, and he looked really good. I don't know what happened when he got in the games, but he played historically bad. And I'm afraid if they truly throw it out to an open competition, he's going to end up be the starter. And then you've kind of burned Sanders, and you got a Watson who's a one and done, because I cannot see them bringing him back nor him wanting to come back. So I just think that it makes sense to me, go with Sanders, see what you got there. If he gets hurt, then you can always go to Watson. But you open it up to competition, the players are going to know. And that's what Monken has said. He wants to win, and I don't blame him. So he's kind of going with a fresh start, and he might really, want to go to Watson. I just feel
they
like
said it's an open competition. I haven't
open competition.
Okay.
They start next week, the first time on the field, and there's been a lot of questions to Monken about, well, who's going to get the first reps? And all he said is, well, we'll probably start with who finished last year. So that's Sanders. He started the last 7 games. I mean, Watson was on injury reserve. So I'm just saying, with his experience and everything, Watson I just think would probably be more natural to look good in practice if you make it an open competition. But we'll see. We'll see what they do.
Watson's a little more athletic. It depends upon what they're evaluating. If they're evaluating accuracy on, throwing it the entire route tree, I think Sanders will be fine. Especially since they're not going to sack him in practice.
Watson also has that busted Achilles, which might slow him down this year. So we'll see. He's coming back from that. Speaking of quarterbacks, I'm curious about your thoughts on some of the guys who might go early day 3, maybe late day 2, if somebody really likes them, like Nussmeier, Drew L.R., Klubnik, any of those guys that you particularly like in that range?
It's funny. Dave and I have gone back and forth as to who after Simpson is the guy. In fact, for a while, he didn't have Simpson on his board. When he started in the summer, and I think I'm going to get him up there starting in September. And he liked Nussmeier, then he liked Beck, then it was Aller. But those 3 have kind of jockeyed for position, in our minds. And right now, we got Nussmeier and Beck neck and neck. I guess I made a rhyme there. Nussmeier is, decent size. He's probably a little bit more athletic than Beck. Both of them have been hot and cold in college. At one time, they're both considered, blue chip type prospects, and now they're more 3rd, 4th rounders as far as how we would rank them. I think they have very good both backup potential with the possibility of starting. They're experienced quarterbacks. They've been in college for a while. They're not, necessarily young guys, so they should be able to command a room right away. I don't think anybody's going to draft them to be a starter right away. They could look at either one of those guys, Aller included, as backups that can develop into starters. Another guy I wouldn't forget about is Cole Payton from North Dakota State, the left-handed quarterback that we really like, upside. But I think somebody's going to draft with the idea that, we think we can develop this kid. So that's going to be, an interesting deal there with those 4 quarterbacks.
Yeah, for sure.
What about Pons from Indiana? Where do you think he falls in? Defensive back from Indiana. I think it's D'Angelo Pons, something like that.
you're not supposed to, be biased, but boy, do I love this kid. As a matter of fact, I didn't mention him as a possible first round pick, but I wanted to. And there's a part of me that thinks some team, I've got, a couple teams I talk to, and I jump up on the table all the time for him, saying is, you could do worse than taking D'Angelo Pons late first round if you need a corner. This kid's a player. He's just a flat-out football player. He's only 5'0", 8'5", 182 pounds, but he plays bigger than he is. He doesn't have length, and he's not a burner speed-wise, but he has the twitch of, he's got one of the best twitch I've seen as far as agility, radius to go up and get the ball. He plays big. He's got a catch radius. He can break up passes. His plant and drive is elite, and he can tackle. He's a tough kid for his size. So, I really like him. I don't think he's going to get out of the second round, but it just depends on what a team is looking for. Some teams just don't want small corners, and 5'0", 8'5" is too small. But he's going to be a really good nickel if for somebody if he's not an outside corner. But I think he can play outside. Darryl Green, you remember him?
Yep.
He was a small and played 19 years in the NFL. So, he had that same kind of twitch. Green might have been faster for the era, but I like him a lot.
All right, John, do you mind taking a few questions from our chat room here?
Okay, I hope so.
Well, they're digging up some names here. Willie here asked, what do you guys think of Sawyer Robertson, QB of Baylor, as a developmental replacement for Gabriel and a backup plan for Shedeur Sanders? That's not
I've got that question a lot, not specifically about him as a backup to Sanders, but about what his prospects are as a player. The kid's athletic. He's been a 3-year starter, so he's got enough experience to play. I like the athleticism that he brings to the table. He led Power 4 in pass attempts. He's a high volume guy, so he's done a lot. He's got good arm strength. He can make every throw you need in the NFL. He's a good processor. He takes the ball out on time. He's a little bit of a risk taker sometimes. His release can lag a little bit. He can telegraph his passes. He's not real good in the pocket, in a crowded pocket, as far as getting rid of the ball. Sometimes he's going to fly out of there before he should. Sometimes he gets sacks. He probably takes more sacks than he should. Never played under center, so NFL teams like you to do that. So he's going to have to do that. He's inconsistent with his mechanics, and in 3 years you would hope he'd be more consistent than that. But that said, we think he's a guy that could get drafted in as high as the 5th round, and he's going to be, we think, a quality backup because of the athletic traits that he brings to the table. I'm not sure he's ever going to be a great starter, but I think the viewer's idea of him as a backup is a good one.
Got some other ones from the chat room. Fumble 13 said, who would be your blocking tight end? We've got Harold Fannin, a terrific receiving tight end, but could use a true blocker. One guy I hear a lot about is Max Clare. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, you don't need me for that one, because that's the guy I was going to say. Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's a guy that we think is, probably the best blocker, of the group, who's also got some solid receiving skills. The kid from Houston, Kozai, has potentially a solid blocker. After that, Bentley from Utah. Other than that, this is, most of these tight ends are going to be receiver first, and, blocking is going to be developmental. But, Clare is a guy that we think, is pretty well on his way to being a pretty good two-way tight end, and we think he's a 2nd-round pick. There's some people that have him lower than we do. We understand that, but we like him.
Yeah, he had a heck of a year before he went to Ohio State as well. Just a really interesting prospect. Another question from Jeff Tucker. He wants to know, do you have Blake Miller as a left tackle or right tackle?
Yeah, where do you want him? we like him as either one. You know, we think he could play either one. I mean, he's a 4-year starter. He's one of the few true freshmen that started on an offensive line, and he's played both. He's played both right tackle and he's played both left tackle. Really good in his zone scheme. We think he could be a first-round pick. Yeah, we think he's kind of towards the end of the first round, early second. We got a 1-2 grade on him. You know, he's an interesting guy. He's from Ohio, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's from right up here by Cleveland, Strongsville.
Okay. Yeah, no, we like him a lot. We could definitely see him going in the first round. You know, if we got an 8.97, which is the highest second-round grade that you can get, just about. There's maybe one higher. But just because it's a second-round grade, it only did it so we had to have 32 first-round grades. Is the way, you know, Dan likes us to do this. So, but I'd give him a first-round grade. So that's why we got the 1-2 range on him.
Well, we got two more from the chat room. Another one from Fumble 13. We talked about this a little bit earlier about Tyson and his medical issues. Do you like him so much that you would be interested in drafting him, you know, in the first half of the first round, or would those medical issues sort of push him a little bit later?
I would be interested in drafting him that high, just because I think he's realistically, if he's healthy, he's the best. I think he's the best receiver in the draft. Understand the hamstring issues. Understand the fact that he didn't work out, and that's going to bother some teams. And he might slip out of the first week. You know, the NFL, what they do is they get the medical reports, the final medical reports on Monday of next week. At least that's what it used to be. And then they can make their decisions finally on their board if this is going to change their board at all. There's also what they call a security report. They used to anyway. And that's where they find out if there's anything in their background, you know,
right,
in terms of like the, you know, they beat somebody up, or, you know, somebody blew up at a reporter and threw something at him or whatever. Those things come out, and then teams have to scratch their head and decide. And teams are getting awfully careful about that stuff. They're really getting more careful than they used to be. You know, it used to be they'd take guys and anything, didn't matter, you know, but now that stuff is so out in the open, and, you know, anything, injury, you know, if there's anything in their background, character-wise, you know, some of the things we get, there's 2 codes on some of our database. One is M and one is C. And M is medical and C is character. And so I always want to know, and the NFL teams get obviously a lot more detailed information than we do, you know, in terms of what's there. So Tyson is an interesting one. Knowing the Arizona State people, I would take him.
Fair enough. And the last question we have from our chat room is from It's a Boy Oz 1987, asking, what do you think about Ted Hurst? He reminds me of AJ Green. A lot of interest about Ted Hurst in our chat room tonight.
You know, I probably had more questions about Ted Hurst from any of these kinds of than any other guy. I was surprised it took this long. but you know, he's a kid from a smaller school, and the only thing I'll say about that before I talk a lot about Hurst is that what we found is a lot of these guys that are coming out of FCS and they're coming out of a group of 6s, it's now going to be the good ones go in the portal, and you know they become like a farm system for Power 4, just like FCS is becoming a farm system for a group of 6, and Division 2 is a farm system, you know, for FCS, and not as many great players are coming out early, and you know, Ted Hurst is a good receiver. He's got all the tools you want. The competition is the only thing that bothers me a little bit, but he's 6'3 and a half. He's got a great catch rate, a good catch radius, not great, a good one, and he can run. He's a little bit raw, as a route runner, but he's got good hands and he's got upside to develop into a quality receiver. We have a 4th, 5th round grade on him. I think he very well, if some team really likes the upside, they could draft him higher. The other thing I'll say about that is this is a good year for depth in the receiver core. There's not a lot of elite receivers, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of receivers that have some similar traits, and so teams are going to have to decide, is that 6'3.5" and speed, worth developing? Can we develop this kid? Is he really good enough? Is he tough enough against his competition? I like him. We had a tough time stacking him as far as where we're at. He's like about our 18th or 19th guy. And realistically, he's probably going to be higher for some teams on their boards.
Very good. Thank you. Fred, any final questions for Jon?
No, I mean, we could go on and on. We appreciate this. Yeah, it's just unending, on the possibilities. And finally, in a week and a day, we'll kind of be able to see what teams actually think of these players and not necessarily what we think about them. But we thank you for your expertise and for all the time and effort you put into the Ourlad's guide, and make sure you go out and get this. Yeah,
it's still available. You got to go to the website, ourlads.com, and in the left-hand corner at the top, buy draft guide. Get on the menu. The mail's a little slow, so it needs to get on it right away to get one, or we can sell you a PDF a lot cheaper.
Yeah, you get that right away.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Jon. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you.
Good.
Everybody remember to go to Ourlad. All right. Bye-bye. All right, Fred. Well, I feel like I know a little bit more about what's coming up here in the draft. Are you going to learn anything more with Andrew Berry tomorrow?
Well, you know what? You can't really. I mean, last year kind of solidified for me, and I know it's not his job to tell us what they're going to do, but I mean, he went on and on about Travis Hunter last year when they had the number 2 pick, knowing that he already had a trade in place, to trade down with Jacksonville to do what they did, as long as the Titans took Cam Ward, and that was 99.9% sure that was going to happen because they announced it was going to happen. And so he went on and compared Hunter to Shohei Ohtani. And you're like, how in the world, and I even wrote this, how in the world could you pass up Shohei Ohtani? You'd be the worst general manager in the major leagues, if you did that. And what they do, they did that. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't know what he's going to say. And I really think that he doesn't know maybe right now who they're going to draft. I do think they want to trade down, but I hope they're not desperate and just trade down to trade down.
Right.
Because you got to get quality players. Sometimes it's just like trading Myles Garrett. Oh, we get 3 first-round picks. Well, if you get 3 first-round guys that you never heard of, what good did that do you? Plus, you're not going to I don't care how many picks you get, you probably wouldn't get 1 Myles Garrett. So that's the thing. I'm just anxious to see how this all unfolds, in a week. We're tired. We're to the point of being tired of talking about it. I've been writing about what they should do every day this week. There's 5 steps. Today was the 3rd. Tomorrow's the 2nd. And then Friday's the 1st. Then we get to talk about it next week for 3 days, dawn to dusk, it seems like.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, part of that is going to be the OBR Draft Cave, which, hang on a second here. There we go. There's the logo, the OBR Draft Cave. Make sure that you stop by. We are going to be live throughout the draft weekend after next in the Draft Cave. Fred will have you. And we'll have Park Fizzler out there in Pittsburgh and just the rest of the gang talking draft throughout the weekend. So make sure you tune into YouTube, the OBR channel, for the Draft Cave on draft weekend. Please, if you have an opportunity, subscribe to this channel. Give us an upvote. We'd love to have it, and we appreciate you watching tonight. Fred, my pleasure joining you again on Wednesday night. It's been a while, but
yeah,
get some.
did a great job.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys. Thanks for watching.
All right. Thanks for joining. See you next
Good
week.
night.